Final dungeon. Where was my final dungeon, Square Enix? Where was it? What's going on? How are you doing? Forgive the lighting. The sun is setting here over the beautiful city of Colombia, Medellin. So it may be a little bit dark, but I'm back from ayahuasca, and I don't know if I'm releasing this before or after. I just did a video with Bree, walking through the countryside, talking about all the things we love with 16. And there is a lot. There is a lot I really appreciate about this main line. I'm coming away with fond thoughts and feelings, and overall I'm very, very pleased. But I'm going to talk about the main gripe that I have. And this is my main feeling. At 16, I spoke about the ending, why I wasn't able to really fully grieve Clive, Joshua, very much Dion, like their deaths, why they were impactful and so beautifully done, especially, I mean, the fight leading up with Dion, you know, the Troy disaster, and the cinematography and the spell effect, the lighting, everything. So grandiose, so awesome. Joshua's speech, the emotion, the weight of it, thanking him for being his brother, so powerful. It's not to say, and Clive on the beach, and there's absolutely so much I can take away from both a tragic ending and being happy with it, Clive dying for this world, and I don't need everyone to be alive. This is what frustrates me so much about everyone who is criticizing people like myself who weren't happy with ending the 16. Oh, you just can't deal with sad endings. Not true. I love 15's ending. I think 15's ending was one of the strongest parts about 15, and it left me on a high of the game. But yeah, I've spoken about this and why, despite all of those really beautiful parts of 16, my overall feeling was just emotional stagnation. Like, I don't know if I'm being faked out. Is he really dead? I don't know. No, I'm taking away all of this lore and symbology and the themes and in the quests that hint at either Joshua very strongly likely being alive, you know, Ultima casting rays, Clive still being alive, potentially Metia's magic ending and him not petrifying fully, Hippocrates picking up the pen, all of this stuff I know. But it doesn't change the fact, and I mean, that if they'd have put a final dungeon, a big, juicy, complex Final Fantasy El Clasico final dungeon, that all of this would have hit so much stronger. It would have been a more impactful ending, and it really wouldn't have hurt the game in the way they did. Change my mind, because I'm going to try to change some of your mind. I'm going to paint a picture for you guys of what we could have had with the final dungeon. So I've gone away and I've made some notes, and I'm going to give you what my version of 16's ending should have been. This is going to be my headcanon going forward, and I personally think it will put into context what Square Enix could have done, and that clearly they ran out of time. I feel like it was a rushed ending. The outcomes, I could take either dying or living, but it's the setup to it that's really, really important. So Origin, the place that Ultima yeeted up into the sky. I don't believe it should have been a sky fortress. I believe that Ultima should have taken over Origin and should have been where Crystalline Dominion was still situated. In between all the nations, Wallowed, and with its very unique point, you know, on the ocean, the intersecting part of the two continents, and they simply walled it off, cocooned it, and created big crystal walls around it. Built a wall, Ultima Trump style, a giant crystalline palisade that it was the doomsday clock and the awakening, the wake-up call for all the other nations. The crystals are gone, and this is what is going to destroy our world if we don't unify. Because this whole world that was thrust into war, and all these nations banging out, we just followed for 50, 60 hours, locked into these cultural greeds and evils and short-sightedness that we did kind of start seeing getting realized. The very significant part was when Uncle Byron and the Republican Dalmec leader, like the main one, the one that Hugo shoved down, they were back to back and they were fighting, and it was all about how short-sighted we've been. This whole time we've been going at each other, and what for? What was it all for? The pointlessness of war was like so starkly shown to us in that scene and commented on by the characters. And then also to have Dion, you know, a third nation, show up with Terran, show up with these dragoons and help them out. And there was this momentary sense of, was been very powerful the game, unification between all these different nations. I really do believe this would have been a better setup and would have been so much cooler that in those final side quests, of which there were some really, really good ones, the Jill and Clive date scene, Torgal going in like keeping items of Clive's, But there were also a lot of nothing burgers in there. The Dame and Lubor, and we went to these different nations, and it was just where the game fell off a cliff. Martha hoisting a frying pan. One dude who's kind of like in charge of Sanbreque, like, yeah, we might make our capital over here now, and what are you talking about, you filthy, skanky prostitute whore? I don't care what you think. Oh, actually, no, I've had an argument with my daughter now. I think that women like you should lead our nation. And like Lubor with like the kids. I'm a bearer, I might play the villain. Oh no, some kids have jumped in the way of throwing rocks and they gave us. Oh, actually, let's make Lubor the mayor. It was so hollow, and honestly, it was making my stomach turn. I was just laughing and cringing and face palming. Now imagine instead of that, in those moments, Clive was having to go to rally these nations to show them, open their eyes. This is the threat. This is, if you want a world, we all have to fight for it. We have to let bygones be bygones. And with what little parts of these diminished nations, because they felt so diminished at the end. And in part, I see that's kind of what the point is supposed to be. You know, these nations that were once these superpower led by tyrants and theocracies, corrupt republics, kind of becoming more human and like the little guy. I see the point of that diminishment, but then you just left it diminished. The point was you were supposed to then build it back up. And just imagine this, Clive is rallying everyone to the day. This is the day of the attack. And we see Clive rally his Chocobo Knights, like his father Elwyn did. He gets Wade and the other Rosarians, some of the Undying, and he mounts up into battle alongside his brother. Now Joshua, who took Elwyn's helmet from the grave, places it on. And they are positioned. And then we see the other nations arriving. Dalmec, and maybe we see the Iron Kingdom again. The Iron Kingdom don't just become some like hermits who we never see again on the island. They shot Dion in front of his dragoons. Dion was just itching for a redemption arc. You know, he staged that coup. He knew he was the symbol, the figurehead of his people. And after Sylvester and the whole royal family got wiped out, you know, we saw it with the medicine girl, like a small part of Dion having like an authentic moment of reconnecting with his nation. It's just such a disservice that you didn't have Dion have that redemption arc. Rally his people, have them behind him. Even doing it alongside Terence, him showing up with his army, regaining his pride, being that leader of his people. That I felt would have done so much for Dion's character. It was really, really deserved. And before we even get into the walls of Origin, there's hordes of Akashic. Now, all of this sounds like, oh, this would be a lot to do. Yes, it would be a lot to do, but we saw it in the game. It was capable. We saw multiple full-scale wars happening between Dalmec, Sanbreque, and Iron Kingdom, and Dalmec, or Wallow, shall I say. I mean, no, I'm getting that mixed up. But the multiple big set pieces of war that we had, coupling that against the Akashic, we had that in Wallow. You know the Wallow scene where Mid shows up with the boat and there's like Akashic behemoths and ogres and there's loads of them. Blow that up. There was so much, with the mobs being tissue paper, by and large anyway, that there was no real sense of threat. Now, if you'd have created just one big, huge set piece where all these armies are just trying to get past the hordes of Akashic, it's a huge humanity itself, unified with its free will and its consciousness, fighting those with no free will. The army of Ultimas, of his vision of humanity. You know, the thing that even Barnabas, who was supposed to be one of our main villains, was advocating for. That free will is a curse, it's a plague, it's a hindrance. Everything that Lord Commander, the Akashic, they're divine, they're perfect. Let's see that showdown. You know, and I just see Clive leading with his knights, but dealing with his dragoons. And it's positioned in the water, so if it stayed like down, then you had Mid on the Enterprise showing up alongside Byron, who spoke to us that he was going to go gather a fleet. So he gathers a fleet. I don't know, was it from Canva or maybe some residual Northern Territory peoples? You know, I mean, I guess they were just all gone. Even the other continents, like the one on the east, I know that the southern continent with the medicines, you know, the rumours of Lost Leviathan, where Barnabas came from. I know they're all blighted. But I don't know, I feel like you could have then had some extra cool mystery element or army or units. Frankly, I've been saying it throughout, this game should have had some sort of RTS, some kind of military strategy to really engage us in the war. And if we'd have had some sort of mini game or element, just even something minimal. The smallest thing, the smallest RTS element. I mean, like Type 0 did an RTS element, top-down maps, kind of conquering and holding locations. Even Final Fantasy 7 with the Fort Condor, like just something very basic. Could have made all the world of difference. And if we'd have then had that as like the final stage, the hardest stage, and then we go into big cinematic pieces, catapults, and all these different units, even bearers, having bearers. Oh my god, as a unit, at the forefront of this. And maybe as this fight gets like gritty and people are dying, that some of these bearers, they do use their magic. They use fire, they use wind, they use these spells to fight for a world that had always shunned them. And in that moment, these humans, these regular people, had always subjugated and diminished and just treated bearers like trash. To see this moment, God, it would have been powerful, man. See this moment of bearers being people and a part of the world, and in some way having some respect for them. Oh, it would have made a huge difference. And anyway, as we're going through this war, like setup, and this was like the main last piece of the game, we're also going through it with certain characters. I know, maybe Taya having to heal some of the injured. We see a moment with her, and I feel like as we got deeper and deeper, like through Origin, maybe we break through the wall of it. Certain units have to stay back, certain nations, certain characters, and as we go through, just dropping off one by one. Maybe Yotei and the Undying come quite a distance through, and protecting Joshua. And then at some point, we have to see like Yotei. The fact that Yotei was the one who was sent to escort Joshua. This is the Undying's entire duty. Do you not think the Undying would have only put their best Undying to escort Joshua? So it was Yotei. Yet Yotei had a completely different ideology to the rest of the Undying. Clive thought they were just like a bunch of sacrificial weirdos. And he was like, Joshua, what's this like company you're keeping? And actually, he was kind of disgusted, Clive was, by the Undying. And the way that they were very unempathetic, and he just totally didn't understand their culture. And I feel like through Yotei being different, we could have seen something with the Undying. Yotei kind of having an impact on what this Undying is. And in a sense, the Guardians of the Flames, and to see that offset with Wade, all of these things of Rosaria, a nation that had just been diminished to nothing, to not see any moment of them regaining their pride fully. I mean, you're going to tell me Wade going to Eastpool and having to sow a bunch of fucking chocobo, turnip, jizzle green seeds? Jizzy greens. Martha telling him, yo, you got to like feed yourself, you got to stop freeloading, here's some jizzy greens. And like a few Akashic goblins show up. It was such a disservice to even Rosaria as a nation, one that had been stripped, and to not see it kind of rise from the ashes, even just for a moment, just so we have a sense of like there's a future for these other nations. It's not just all about our characters. I don't know, I feel like that could have done so much. So Tarja, Yotei, Blackthorn arming everyone, again like Uncle Byron showing up with all the ships like, alongside Mid's Enterprise. You could have had Karen, you could have had Lubor, giving all of their resources to this war effort. And all of these characters that we only saw them before heading off to Origin, and they all just gathered. And I can't be the only one who found it jarring as fuck. Just to see Lubor, Dame, I mean Dame could have even shown up. Have her and her hordes of prostitutes scaling the Crystal Wall of Origin. Okay, maybe not that, but all of those NPCs in some way playing a role. And as we're playing a role, it wasn't like how the game was where they all just stood around and was like, well, I'll give you one quick kind of awkward line. Like Yotei started speaking and Tarja sort of overlapped. And none of these characters, who were very good, great characterizations. I really, really enjoyed a lot of the NPCs in this. And even ones I didn't fully like at first, like Mid, really started to gain respect and like her. Like when she was at the helm of the ship and yelling at the other crew people, being like very direct and authoritative and commanding. It was so cool. I gained a lot of respect for in those moments. And if we were going through these Akashic hordes and various bosses and generals maybe even, or less significant Akashics, cool boss fights along the way. And I just can't help but think that this would have been so much more powerful for the final goodbyes of these NPCs, to not only see them contribute, to get a real sense of what they're about, but just so much more powerful than just stand there like, see ya. And that applies then for obviously Jill and Torgal. I really do believe Origin being sent up into the sky was just a plot device. Just be like, well, these are the reasons why they have to stay behind. So we're just kind of running out of development time, and we need a reason for Jill and Torgal to stay behind. That's what it felt like. And honestly, I still don't, even today, really know why Jill didn't have her powers as Shiva. You know, I know obviously Clive took them, she gave them to him. But Dion had his taken, and he was still able to be Bahamut. There was no real explanation for that. Jill did not need to lose Shiva. And I think it would have been more powerful if in this entering into Origin, breaking through the front gates, we get inside, and then we see something so cool. Like when we flew over Origin, I'm sure you guys saw it, you saw like a layout of a city, like a kind of evolved, really interesting. I remember when we were flying over it, in the iconic fight, thinking, God, I hope, are we going to go down in there? We're going to get to go down into Origin and explore, and it's going to be this cool final dungeon that's this mix of a psychological weave. Because we had it with Ultima when we went into the Drake's Fang. We had story time with Ultima, where he very briefly and vaguely explained about his nation. Yeah, we were once a nation, we were a race, the blight was creeping on our backs, we had cities, we had airships, and I really thought that was a setup to what they're going to explain with Ultima. And that in Origin, we would go down into the city, and we'd be navigating through, and it would kind of be like Esther. Esther in 8, where it has like the kind of very futuristic metropolis, translucent blue highways, something similar to that, not exactly. And as a few of our characters, the rest of the hold back the hordes, while our main characters pushing further, fighting alongside fucking Dion, and maybe Wade comes in a bit further, and Jill and Torgal. And yeah, I think there's some significant point in there. We're having another story time. Why were the Ultima Collective a collective? What were they before? Why did they choose to become a collective? Why did they choose to shirk off their individuality and their free will to become it? Was it just out of necessity? Did they see other pros to doing it? This is very much like, for anyone who's played 14, I won't say much for spoilers, but Emmett Selk and Amarok. This is what this basically is. No, it doesn't have to be the same, but Emmett Selk and Amarok, and when we went to Amarok, we learned everything about this villain. Everything, and it was powerful. One of the most powerful video game moments I have ever had in Final Fantasy, honestly, was going to Amarok. The way that Square Enix, the way that you did Final Fantasy 16, I just can't believe it because it's 14, it's Yoshi P, it's the same team. Just take a moment to imagine Emmett Selk without Amarok. Well, we never had Amarok as an arc. We never saw it, we never learned about it, we never walked those streets, we never saw the ideology that worked there, where it led to. I mean, I just cannot fathom if they hadn't have done that. We would have learned nothing about Emmett. He would not be the god tier villain that he is. S tier plus. And that's what happened with Ultima. You had a chance to set him up, not to do it the same. He doesn't have to become any better, just gives us the player more nuance to what the fuck this guy was about. Because we really had nothing, guys. And I feel like that would have not only set him up as a villain and made the final fight far more powerful as a result, and the story as a whole, I think it would have also been a huge insight into humanity and its free will. Obviously, we had this conversation between Barnabas and Clive of, you've always had free will. You've served the master the best. Like, this is what humans are. We're always making choices. This was an opportunity to show a world in Ultima's image, walking these streets, seeing this Akashic society, Ultima's paradise, his ideals, like realized in this moment. And we, as the player, get to see nuance, complex, insightful, thought-provoking, emotionally provoking insight into what free will really does for us. And I feel like the psychological games that Ultima started playing, they started strong and they just got weaker and weaker, and that shouldn't have happened. They should have got stronger. That moment where we had Clive and like everyone was sort of like standing around being like, Clive, you're a dick, mate. It was so lame. It really was. Like they were in the jail cells. It was a cool scene, but it didn't land for me personally. I don't know how you guys feel. And honestly, all of this is just my opinion, guys. Let me know in the comment section below. If you have a different image or vision, imagining for how the ending 16 should be, this is just how I seen it. I feel like those mind games should have got more complex. They should have mostly been applied the closer we got to the center of origin. And this would have shown almost what free will and individualism in its darker aspect. Like everything that Clive went through, all of the hurt and trauma and suffering that he experienced in his life. Same for Joshua, Dion. I mean, you could have had like Terrence played against him, Yote, Elwyn, have these characters show up in Ethereum form, or show them lives that could have been had humans not been trapped in duality, which is a cool part of free will. I mean, that is the trade-off for free will. We have it, but it comes at the expense of being lost in duality, lost between our true selves and our egoic selves. And we could have had this very dramatic psychological game as we went through, and to see what the characters were fighting for, have them even tempted to give up their free will and their humanity, have Ultima tease them with like release from their suffering, or mentally torment them with their loved ones in some way, and that by accepting this fate that Ultima's trying to lay down for humanity, that'd be a better outcome. And we would have got to really see the mettle and the grit, the resolve, the determination of our core characters in a far more significant way. And Dion deserved it, and I do feel like Jill at the end deserved it as well. And I just would have liked Torgal to have been there. It was so fucking jarring and horrible to just suddenly have Torgal left behind, especially when he'd been with us the whole game. Anyway, I see this kind of exploration through the metropolis, mind game, story time, psychological setups, and then we get deeper. I feel like at some point, Jill in this navigation should have had to have used Shiva one last time and significantly released Shiva in that moment from her, because it was just kind of watery that she didn't have it. Like, consciously lose Shiva. I think this would have been a far more powerful moment of her letting go of her identity as being a dominant, as being Shiva. And then that's when, after the mind games haven't worked, Ultima's been fleshed out, and as we're going deeper and deeper, it becomes more and more sinister. The shape of it starts changing. I mean, I can't believe that from so many of my fellow Final Fantasy fans, so many of you are like, nah, I'm glad we didn't have a final dungeon. It would have been lame. I was just glad the way that they did it. Really? And now I've asked those people why, and no one has given me a good reason. So here's the reasons that I've heard as to why they're glad we didn't have a final dungeon. The big one was, I'd spent so much time doing pointless, boring side quests before that at this point I was just kind of burnt out and wanted to get the final fight done. That is not a good reason. That is not a good reason. That says nothing for what Square Enix should have done for the ending of this game, or could have done. In fact, this supports it even more. The fact being that the side quest leading up to this could have been the best, could have been the most important, rallying the world to this singular cause, and all of the cool, like, closing, rounding out arcs that we could have had along that way. I want to just get it done because side quests were boring, but they shouldn't have been. The other one was, it would have been a really lame dungeon. It would have just been boring and basic, and would have been fighting the same bosses again and again and again. Also not a good reason. Like, yes, there was too much of the same bosses being regurgitated at us. But that's not to say that it should have been that way, or that the finale. That's the thing, guys, with how much love and attention was poured into this game, and especially the first 50%, the effort and the quality. You make unique bosses for the finale. Period. That's in every game. Full stop. You make loads of cool, intricate encounters. They have to be the hardest in the fight. They have to be the one that tests the character and their skill to the nth degree. Not just a bunch of quick time events. Like, it was really cool, but most of it was just quick time events. And while I did enjoy like the mechanics of the final Ultima fight and the phases of it, it just dragged. It did. It was so long, and to be honest, if you'd have broken that up into multiple cool fights along those encounters, that's when either Jill falls off, and after mind games, then you could keep it the same. Then Ultima, when he realizes his central area, we've got close to it, he yeets up into the sky. Then he disappears like a little bitch up there, and that's when Jill, who no longer has Shiva because she Shivaed out for the last time, and it was a powerful moment. And that's where Torgal also has to be left behind. And it's, okay, now with just Dion, Joshua and Clive, we head up there to Origin. And man, I feel so passionate about this. In my mind, I don't know if I'm articulating it well, but it just would have remedied everything and was the send-off deserved. because not only at that point would we have had the characters all given their individual attention and time, it would have been powerful in the story, the messaging, the exploration, the insights into it. We would have had time to grieve and space out what then happened to the last three. Joshua, Dion and Clive's deaths were back to back. Like less than an hour and a half, guys. It was so breakneck and it just took me so by surprise. Like we just went in, like we're suddenly fighting Ultima and oh, there's Dion. Oh god, what is this happening? Where's Dion actually? Okay, oh no, now Joshua's done. Wait, is he actually? Well, he's Phoenix. Well, Clive's touching him. Well, is that bringing him back? No, he's not. Well, okay, well now we're fighting. Oh, well, Clive's dead. What? That was the ending. Guys, I know like it's totally fine if some of you like that and you like the ending, and believe me, there's parts of me that likes the bold, unceremonious, ruthless, like pacing, and the parts in 16, I like that. And it's fine if you do, but I know I don't, and I didn't, and there are a lot of fans. There's a lot of people who agree with me on this front that it was too rushed. I could not fully grieve, like realize, emotionally connect with what was happening because it was just all happening so fast. And you know, I really would have liked to have fought alongside Dion, seen Joshua in action one last time, in their human forms, and having some camaraderie and having to go through psychological traumas and difficulties and manipulation. And yeah, when we got up to Origin, changed the design of it. I feel like it could have progressively, you know, outside the walls, the battle's still happening. Inside Est City, like Akashic world. And as we get closer, like kind of becoming like Zanarkand. You know, in Zanarkand, where we see like Jack Brasker and Oren. I almost forgot Oren. You know, or like Seymour and his mum, you know, they show up in ethereal form. We could have had like a Zanarkand vibe, and then like maybe twist like a Memoria. Final Fantasy IX's Memoria, just some other Final Fantasy final dungeons, like Ultima's Castle, guys. Pandemonium in Type 0. These are awesome, well-designed, fascinating final dungeons. It blows my mind that as a fan base, from the phenomenal quality and build-up to these final dungeons and fights and experiences at the end of Final Fantasy, like how integral a final dungeon was to these things. It blows my mind, frankly, that there are so many Final Fantasy fans like, nah, we don't need a final dungeon, smudge along. I don't need that shit, I'm glad I don't do that shit. What? Point to me any of those Final Fantasies I just listed. Like even 7, like the Northern Crater wasn't the most fantastically designed place at all, but it was cool. We had to progress through with our characters. There was experience. There was some experience that at least like had a bit of stretch on it, a bit of pacing, a bit of time, a bit of anticipation. And that's why I didn't feel that. I didn't feel engaged with the ending. I didn't feel a part of the ending. It just felt like it was happening to me, and I just can't help feeling really, really pissed that that wasn't what we got for 16. For whatever reason. Maybe they didn't run out of time. I find that hard to believe, though, that this was like genuinely the creative, like, yes, this is what we want. I feel like a lot of things in the latter part, even outside of just this ending, or the final 30% even, could definitely tell. Sort of corners being cut, quality was dropping off. Maybe there's some sort of deadline. I fully believe this wasn't the ending that they entirely wanted. And even if it was what they wanted, it certainly isn't anywhere near as much as what they could have done. The quality that they could have finished this off with. So there we go. That's my concept of the ending of Final Fantasy 16. You didn't even have to change what the ultimate outcomes were. You just need to stretch them, give them more weight. Like Dion, after leading his nation, like him then falling from the sky as Bahamut. And I honestly think just like show it. Unless you plan to do a DLC, that is a forward-facing one, not just like a Sid one, like Yoshi P has kind of hinted he would like to do. Unless there is something like Dion, Joshua, or Clive did survive, then this interpretive ending just weak. I don't vibe it. I think if he was stronger and showed like Dion actually dying after having raised his people, after being tormented with Terrence, and the future, or like the prospect of a future with him was placed at Dion, and he still chose the route of the bigger picture, damn, I would have bawled my eyes out, man. I wanted to feel the weight of like Dion's sacrifice to my core, because he is one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy, and it just would not have taken much. Like all of these characters, Joshua, Clive, and Dion, really hit a spot for me, and that is a testament to the broader game. But that's why I just know for me the ending is so weak, because of how much impact these characters had, how much attachment and care and interest and intrigue in following their journeys I had accumulated. The fact that you essentially killed them, but you didn't even elicit a tear from me. For me, I wept like a baby with 15. Type 0, I stayed up till 6 in the morning crying. Behemoth quality characters. It would have taken a small thing to set me off, and he didn't manage it, just for me personally. And I wish they did. I really do. That's the thing. I've gone away and I've really thought about 16, why enjoy it, how I can enjoy it, how can I look at it differently. I've explored every theme there is. I've explored every bit of symbolism. I've derived different meaning for myself. But that's why I needed to get this video off my chest. 16 needed a final dungeon, rally the nation, go into Origin, have our final scenarios with all our cool characters, final ones with Jill, set up Ultima, go up, kill the characters, lots of cool imagery and various dungeon elements, psychological elements, and then bam, fight Ultima, curtain closed, 10 out of 10, my favourite Final Fantasy of all time. That was it. You had it, Square. You had it for like the first 70% of the game, honestly. I was like, damn, this actually might not be my favourite Final Fantasy of all time. And I fully believe because you did not do that final dungeon, either what I'm riffing, or close to it, or better than it. Well, again, I'm not that creatively dope, like coming up with ideas, but come on, I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of that. Would you have preferred an ending like that, similar to that? How do you feel about Final Dungeons? How do you feel about the ending of 16? Anyway, the sun is setting. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Comment, like, and subscribe. And if there's anything else you want me to cover in Final Fantasy, let me know. Until the next video. Was we going to try to hold that in? Let's just get the Kupo out. Kupo!